right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to the virtual version of our Alumni Ancestry Exploration event. I'm Audrey Tierney, the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by Linda Loewer, who will once again be sharing her expertise with us on researching your genealogy. She was more than happy to move this program online today, and so we thank her for her flexibility. Also joining us is our Assistant Vice President of Alumni Engagement, Sarah Sperry, who will be helping to run the technical end of the program. Before I introduce Linda, I have just a few notes in regards to the session. Throughout the program, your microphones will be muted, and you may also turn off your video if you prefer. For optimal viewing, you'll want to check the top right-hand corner of your screen. If it says Speaker View, click on it to ensure you will be able to view the video of the person who is speaking. If it says Gallery View, you are already in Speaker View. Linda will start the session by answering some of the most frequently asked questions related to ancestry research. Then she will address a compilation of your questions that you submitted when registering. Once we've gotten through this section, we will open up the floor so that you can ask any follow-up questions you may have. To do this, you can either click on the Participant tab and click on the blue Raise Your Hand button, or you may submit a question through the chat feature found on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. If you raise your hand, we will unmute you to enable you to ask your question at that time. Linda will answer as many questions as possible during the hour and a half we have allotted for this session. We'll be sure to remind you of these options though once we get to that part of the program. Now I would like to introduce Linda Loewer, who will be running our Ancestry program this evening. Our students know Linda as the Assistant Director for Internships and Experiential Education in the Center for Career Development. But what they might not know is that Linda has always been interested in genealogy and history. She grew up in a family that admired their ancestors, shared stories, and met annually at family reunions. Her family also saved and passed down heirlooms and stuff. Linda is the recipient of much of this stuff. She has recorded the stories she heard as a child, videotaped family members reminiscing about their childhood, and trudged through many, many cemeteries in search of ancestors and family stories. She is a member of the North Hills Genealogists, the Western PA Genealogical Society, and the Western New York Genealogical Society. She also appears periodically on KDKA-TV's Pittsburgh Today Live with Rich Venezia, a professional genealogist, and is on the conference committee for the North Hills Genealogists. Now I will turn our session over to Linda. I hope you enjoy the program.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for joining me today. And what I did was, many of you had submitted questions and I placed those in different categories, or put it this way, I categorized them. And so I put together a presentation. Hopefully I'm answering the majority of your questions, and some questions were really specific. So I will get to those towards the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with the general and then go to the more specific. So many of you actually asked the question, and here we go. These are some of the questions that were asked, is where do I start? Where do I begin my family tree? Where do I go to find birth, marriage, and death records? Where did my family come from? How do I find my family in the census? And how do I find my family history on the internet? Where can I find ship passenger lists? And why was my ancestor's name changed at Ellis Island? So you can see they started out with the very general, where do I start? Which is actually a very good question. And then to the more specific, where can I find ship passenger lists? And why was my ancestor's name changed at Ellis Island? And there were some that were even more specific than that last one. So one thing I'd like to start out with before I actually get into the presentation is I want to make sure that you are aware of different resources that are in the Western PA area. So because I think many of you are actually going to be using this information. So one is the Carnegie Library in Oakland. They have a Pennsylvania room. It is full of librarians and genealogists, and they are there to help you. They know their stuff. They really know the information. Also, the people at the Senator John Hines History Center. And again, this is a great resource. There's a library there, and they have all sorts of information on the history, obviously, of Southwestern PA. And then Historic Pittsburgh is an online resource that people often use as, and then there's the Catholic Historical Society, which is obviously available to people who are searching for, I want to say like birth records, well, vital statistics. As a matter of fact, you can contact them. They can help you out. There are usually fees associated with the Catholic Historical Society. So not included in this slide, but included in another slide later on are genealogical societies, such as the North Hills Genealogists, which is a wonderful organization. You can attend their meetings. They're free of charge, and it costs only $15 to join for a year, and definitely well worth it. And then the Western Pennsylvania Genealogical Society, which I am a member of both of those. And again, the cost is minimal, but very, very helpful people, and they always have guest speakers. So and again, the questions that were asked are kind of all over the place in this presentation, but there are so many resources in this area that there's bound to be someone. If I can't help you, if I can't steer you in the right direction, there are people who certainly can. So to get started, yeah, where do I start? Well, believe it or not, the best place to begin is with you. You're the one who, I want to say you're the focus, but you want to start with yourself. You want to work from the present, and you want to go backwards, starting with what you know. So you're probably wondering, what is that picture there? What is that woodsy look? And what I want to tell you is those are stepping stones. And what I like to say is that when you start with yourself, you're really building stepping stones to the past. So what you want to do when you start, like again, some of the questions were, where do I begin? How do I find my mother's side? How do I research my husband's side? And these really all start from the same place, and that's to start with you. So you want to write down everything that you know about you and your own family, or if it happens to be your husband and your husband's family. But you already have a lot of information. You already have a lot of information. You probably celebrate birthdays, and you celebrate anniversaries and things like that. So write down what you know, and you'll want to organize the information using the family group record form, which you can do that for each direct ancestor for 4 generations. This makes it easy to be organized. And in one of the slides later on, I'm going to show you what that family group record looks like. So, and keep in mind too, that there are a lot of free resources that are online, and I'm going to provide you with some links to that, and that includes the family group record. I guess one thing that I would like to say is it's very, very important to be organized. I will tell you that, and maybe this is a confession, that I do have boxes, and I have little pieces of paper with notes written on, and that's really not a good way, but to keep track. And it's not that I'm keeping track that way, but if I hear something, I write it down real quick. It goes into a box, and then what I do is maybe once a month, it depends on how busy I am, I go through that, and I will take those bits of paper and put them, add them to the family group record, or put them in a notebook for a particular person. So really try to stay organized. And as you're writing things down, keep that in mind, because you don't want to have things all over the place. And one of the things that Audrey mentioned was that I am the recipient of a lot of stuff from my family, and it's true. And since this lockdown that we've had, of course, I've had more time to be at home, and I started to go through boxes, and I am amazed at some of the things that I have that I did not realize I had. So you do have things, not only the things that you know, but look for information from family sources. So you have a lot of information in your own records. And then you'll want to interview extended family members and especially the elderly, because they're going to have important firsthand knowledge. And, you know, I hate to say this, but so many people wish that they had interviewed a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle who are now gone. And so, you know, get on the phone if you can't visit, or, you know, just ask simple questions. But that's really an important thing, is, again, start out with what you know and then go and ask your extended family. And then what you'll want to do is stop and review your forms, identify what's missing, and then decide on a single question that you would like answered. Whoops, I guess I have a typo in there, that you would like answered, such as maybe your great-grandfather's birth date. Maybe there's a question about that, or maybe somebody's marriage date. Maybe you're not quite sure what that is. So, you know what, I can tell you, I have an aunt who used to, everyone thought that she was born in 1929. Well, actually, she was born in 1926. She just shaved off a few years, and no one really knew that till she died. So, you know, it's one of those things. It's funny, the kinds of stories that people tell when they're alive, and so it's good to get that information now. But anyway, identify what's missing, identify what you want to learn, and then add that to your family group record and to your notes. And then one thing that I would like to add, and that is you want to make sure that you use the FAN method. And what that is you want to check on, you don't, let's see, how can I say this? I think that many people, they are very interested in going back to their direct line. So it would be me, it would be my parents, then my grandparents, and then great-grandparents. But honestly, when you're doing searching, when you're doing research and that, you'll find that you have to spread out a lot because things aren't necessarily written down and easy to find. And sometimes you really do have to dig. So the more information that you can get, and I'll talk a little bit about this later when we look at the census, sometimes you have to pay attention. Actually, you really should be paying attention to all the information that's around your family, because there are going to be clues and hints that you receive that are going to help you achieve your goals of finding your family. And then find what you'll want to do, or maybe one option you can do, is to start a pedigree chart to see your family tree at a glance. So this is something that I have, and it's the one that I have, I think, is 12 generations. It goes back a lot, and I have a lot of empty spaces. And really, all it does is provide me with my family tree at a glance. What am I missing? What do I need to work on? And it's very helpful to me because it keeps me focused. And then you may want to place that information into a genealogy database. And this could be online, or you can purchase something. I actually have mine, I have mine in a couple places. I have an actual paper pedigree chart, because it's easy for me to add. I don't have to log on, and I can erase things easily. I don't know, I like paper. Maybe that's the old-fashioned person in me, but I do like paper. And then I do have a tree on Ancestry. I also have a tree on Family Search. My Family Search tree, and we'll go into that a little bit, is not, it's not extensive. I prefer Ancestry.com, but not everybody does. So that's one thing that we'll talk a little bit later on. So keep in mind the FAN method, family, associates, and neighbors. That's very important. And then again, consider creating a pedigree chart. It's just, like I said, an easy way to see your family tree at a glance. One of the questions that we had from someone was to ask how to see a family tree at a glance. And I would say this is the pedigree chart. Now, can you see, you're the one who's going to have to put it together. That's the thing. It's possible to see them on Family Search. It's possible to see them on Ancestry.com and some other websites. However, one of the things that you want to do is make sure that the information is correct. And I'll go into that a little bit more. So here's an example of a family group record from FamilySearch.org. So FamilySearch.org is a free, I guess, a free database, and you can create a family tree. So again, a lot of forms can be found free of charge on FamilySearch.org. And when you, if you just Google FamilySearch.org, or just, if you Google family history forms, all sorts of things will pop up. And they're not all the same. Some of them are different, but you'll want to use the one that you like. And sometimes it's just a matter of, okay, well, this looks pretty easy for me to use. I'll use this one. You don't have to do a lot of research into what works. You like, in other words, if there are 10, simplify and just pick one that you like. Don't I guess, get caught up in all of the, you know what I mean? Like really evaluating it. Just see what you think would work best for you, because sometimes you can get caught up in trying to evaluate every little thing. So anyway, this is an example of a family group record, and these are very, very helpful. And again, think, if you just do 4 generations, it'll be very helpful to you. And again, you'll be able to identify the information that you're missing, and maybe information that maybe you have information that'll help you find what you're looking for. Okay, so the next thing is, here's an example of a 6th-generation pedigree chart. And again, this is helpful to me because, again, I can see what I've got. And just real quick, now this is not mine, and you can see on the right-hand side, pretty soon it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You should see my 12-generation chart. There's like, it's very difficult to get information on it, but at least I know what names I have. And then what I do is I go to Ancestry.com to put more information in. I will tell you that you really should, you really should make an effort to put time aside to work on this. So maybe it's going to be every Saturday morning, or maybe every Wednesday morning, or maybe every Wednesday evening, something like that, just to do a couple hours, because you do have to put, the effort in. Otherwise, you end up with those little slips of paper in not just 1 box, but 2 boxes and 3 boxes, and then you don't have time because it's a lot. It's really overwhelming. All right, so a few people asked about birth, marriage, and death records. And these are called vital statistics. So where do you go to find them? So for genealogical purposes, records may be found in many places. And so you'll find them in local repositories. Many can be found on free and fee-based genealogy websites, and then also again in family records. In some of the boxes that I have, I've got death certificates of my not just my parents, but then also of my grandparents. I don't have any for my great-grandparents, although I think a few of them were here in the United States at that time. So if I have boxes that I don't realize that I have, who knows? Maybe I even have death certificates for them. But here's the thing: you want to look to see where are these. So yeah, where do I go to find vital statistics records? So you have to decide, you have to learn, and I guess you have to research where were records kept during the time period and the place that you're looking for. So some records are kept in parishes, some records are kept at the states, and some are in the countries. Some are civil registries and some are church registries. So what was the governing body? Who made the decisions on where some of these records were kept? And then how do you search within that record? So it can be confusing, and that's why I would say it's important to, you know, you can do some searching on the internet, but then, you know, I have to say I'm a big fan of genealogical societies, because people who join and people who have knowledge of these things, they are more than welcome to help you find what you're looking for, or at least point you in the right direction. Like, they're not going to do the work for you, but they will definitely point you in the right direction. They're very, very helpful, and they are more than willing to share the information that they have, the knowledge that they have. So again, records can be found in many places. And to give you an example, now this isn't necessarily birth, marriage, or death records, but I'm from Buffalo originally. And so my family's from Buffalo. So grandparents, that's where they settled when they came to the United States. And the church that my grandfather, my paternal grandfather attended, and his family, his entire family attended, was in Buffalo. And when I looked to see, and of course we never went there when I was young, so I had never been there before, and I had to actually look things up to find out where it was. But because he changed religion, you know, that's one thing. He married my grandmother and he changed religion. So I didn't know anything about the church that he attended when he was young and his whole family attended. So I just started Googling, and then I eventually found the church, and of course the church closed. And then in, like, I don't know, 2006 or 2007, the church burned. But where are the records? Well, it turns out that the records are in Philadelphia. So I made a trip to Philadelphia, and I was able to look through the records there. And so again, you know, you would think, oh, it's in Buffalo. No, not really. I had to go to Philadelphia to find the records that I was looking for. So you have to keep an open mind, and don't think, again, that it's going to be a straight line to find what you're looking for. So then how do you find where these records are? So one of the things that you can do is you can Google vital records, and then even a location. So Vital Records Canada. And the results will bring up several choices and may include websites. So some of the websites that may come up are Family Search, Ancestry, MyHeritage, as well as government repositories. So again, you'll hear me talk about Family Search and Ancestry. So Family Search is and I'm just trying to think if I have a slide in here, but Family Search is a genealogical website that you can use to find a lot of information. It is free. It is provided free. There's actually even a Family Search history guide. Well, let me think, I have it in here. Family History Library Research Guide that'll help you. I know that when I've gone and used Family Search and Ancestry.com, and Ancestry.com is fee-based, it is not free, that I am able to find the documents that I'm looking for. So I am able to find birth, marriage, and death records. It doesn't mean that they're all there. A lot depends on availability. It depends on if the records have been digitized or not. I think one person asked about, they had found a record, a digitized record, and then it disappeared. Where did it go? So I'll address that a little bit later. But yeah, so there are ways to find it. But one of the things, if you, I guess I would make it easy on myself if I were you, I would go into familysearch.org. If you don't mind spending money, go ahead and go on to ancestry.com. But some things you're going to find on both Family Search and Ancestry, but sometimes they might just be on Ancestry, or they might just be on Family Search. If you use Family Search doesn't just pull up family records that are found on Family Search. They will let you know if something is on Ancestry.com. And as far as I know, with Ancestry.com, you can but you can utilize it for free for 14 days, I believe. You want to check into that. So that might be something that if you need information, you could try something like that if you didn't want to pay. The other thing, though, is if you are in Allegheny County, then you should be able to use Ancestry.com because the library system pays for it. The only thing is, I believe that you have to be at the library, and the libraries are currently closed. They will be opening up, but double check with your library and find out about accessing it there. So that's that. All right, so how do I find my family in the census? Well, I find the census very, very helpful. There are different types of censuses in the United States. there are federal censuses, and they're available from 1790 to 1930, but they don't all ask the same information, and they don't all provide the same information either. So if you think about here, it's 2020, not 1920, 2020, and there's been, well, hopefully you know that this year there were all sorts of controversies about the questions that they were going to ask in 2020. So, there is a discussion, what kind of information do we want to know in the census? So in these censuses, they ask different questions. Now you can go, they are public, and you can, they are public to 1930. And actually, for 1940, I think it's coming up maybe in the next 3 years or so. But they ask different questions. I know that at different times they've asked, are you a naturalized citizen? Or what is your occupation? Did you go to school? What was your, what was the last year that you, or what was the grade that you achieved? So they ask different questions. Where are you from? Sometimes they're very specific, and sometimes they're pretty general. Like in much of mine, it says Germany, or it might say Mecklenburg. So it just depends how people want to answer. And I'll show you, I'll get into that a little bit more about that. But then the states. So states also have censuses, and they vary. There's not consistent. Even though I say that there's a federal census every 10 years from 1790 to today, in 1890, the 1890 census, there's just a tiny bit because that census was destroyed, I believe, in a fire. And so that really is not, that's really not available. And that is really troublesome to people who are doing research and family search. So I know that in New York State, for example, in 1892, they did a census. So even though for my family, we don't have the 1890 census, but we do have the 1892 census. So you don't forget, there's more than just the federal census. There are states that also perform censuses. And then one thing too that I don't have on here, and I know we're talking about censuses, but there are city directories, because you can find out a lot of information. If you think that federal census is every 10 years, well, what if somebody moves? Just for an example, so June 1st, right, we had a census that, okay, where are we? My son just moved. He moved out of Pennsylvania, and he moved to California. Well, the 2020 census is going to say that he lived in Pennsylvania, but honestly, for the next 10 years, he's going to be in California. So that would be missed if we didn't use other, say in 100 years that somebody didn't use other resources to find out where he lived. So let's see. So to find out what kind of censuses throughout the world, one thing you may want to do is go to this website. And this is very specific here, cindyslist.com. And the addition there is census-worldwide, and it can let you know what kind of censuses. Think about England, for example. They've done censuses for years, centuries, right? So if your family's from there, so here's an opportunity for you to look and see, okay, where are these censuses, and how will that help me do my research? And just again, Cindy's List is amazing. It can provide you, and I think that I might have a slide in here on Cindy's List so that you can see. But Cindy's List, if you have a question, go to Cindy's List. It's a free website, and it's full of all sorts of resources, and it'll help you find, not the answer, but it'll help you find the way to get to the answer that you're looking for. Well, hopefully. Okay, and I say hopefully because there's no guarantee that you are actually going to find the documents that you want. That's just how things are. Things disappear, things disappear in floods and fires and sometimes wars, right? So there are challenges. So when you're looking for your family in a census, that there are some challenges. So one thing is there are variations in the spelling of names. Oftentimes people spelled, like, so today, right? And today we're very particular about how we spell our names. However, things get spelled wrong. So for example, if you take a look at my last name, which is my married name, it's Loewer, but oftentimes it's spelled Lower. And this happens even on official documents, it happens. So imagine before things were standardized that the spelling of names can be different. So be very open to the spelling of a name. And then also, they were pronounced differently in different regions. So I'm just trying to think. So a name, maybe how it was pronounced here in Pittsburgh, it might be different in Richmond, Virginia, right? And so it might be spelled different there. Or maybe over in, in Germany. So you just be aware that there are going to be variations in the spelling of names, and just remember to be open to that. And then when you're also looking at censuses, note that there are errors. So there are people who are indexing the censuses, and oftentimes they have difficulty reading handwriting and then distinguishing individual records. So here, and I'll give you an example of this. So my maiden name is Kranz. It's K-R-A-N-Z. So K-R-A-N-Z. And in the 1900 census, I could not find my family. I could not find my grandfather when he was 7 years old. And I knew where they lived. I knew the street that they lived in, because there was no 1890 federal census, but because there was a New York State census in 1892, I knew that where the family lived. And so they were there in 1892, and I had them at the same address in 1910, but I could not find them in 1900. For some reason, I was having a hard time. But by going back to the censuses, both the 1892 state census and the 1910 federal census, I looked at who were those, what are the names of their neighbors, who's living in their neighborhood. And then I was able to find the 1900 census with my family's name on. So what had happened? They hadn't moved. Oh no, they still lived at the same address, but the indexer, the person who indexed the census, they thought the name was K-R-A-U-Z instead of K-R-A-N-Z, and that made all the difference. So there are errors, and again, so this shows that there are errors and you have to be careful. But also that you have to pay attention to the friends and the associates and the neighbors. So I really needed to pay attention to that and get the names of the neighbors. So when you're looking at censuses, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're looking at more than the index. You want to make sure that you're actually looking at the census image. And then you can use your knowledge to make a determination about the information, just like I did, even though it was, it looked like K-R-A-U-Z. I knew by the first names and by the address and the ages that was my paternal grandfather's family. So, okay, how do I find my family history online? So there are some free and fee-based websites such as FamilySearch.org, Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, Find My Past. There are many. Again, I think that, well, I want to say the two most popular are FamilySearch.org and Ancestry.com. But that doesn't mean that everybody uses those. And FamilySearch.org is free, Ancestry.com is fee-based. I don't pay that much attention to the others only because I can get most of my information from FamilySearch.org and Ancestry.com. What you may want to do is play around with this a little bit and see what works best for you. But again, if you're looking for something that doesn't cost anything, FamilySearch.org, I would say, is probably the one to go with. But there are other sources to find records and information online. There are indexes for biographies, for family histories. There are institutional records. So there are a lot of records online. And then there's also social networks such as Facebook. So I happen to have a Facebook account, and on Facebook, there's North Hills Genealogists, right? There's also Western Pennsylvania Genealogical Society. So, and I see people posting information. And there are also, there are families that have Facebook pages, or like, oh, I'm just trying to think. My family's from, oh, do you think I can remember? I want to think, I'm trying to think of the specific, the Facebook webpage that I belong to, or the Facebook page that I belong to, and I can't think of it offhand. But people drum down to get very, very specific. So there might be something on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook and you really don't want to do it, don't do it. You know, don't feel like you're forced to go to work at, to be on Facebook. But if you are, it might be something that you want to look into. And then some important guidelines. Look for original source records, so to document facts: birth, marriage, death, census, military. So I have a cousin who, she's a retired teacher, and she is very meticulous. So I feel that the work that she does, I can trust her, because she does this. She looks for original source records. She's got copies of birth certificates and marriage certificates, and she will go to courthouses, and she pays for, you know, for copies of original records. My husband's aunt did some research probably maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and it was a hobby. And I do have some of the information that she provided, but honestly, I am hesitant to trust what she has done, and because I don't really know if she was meticulous or not. So any information that I get from her, or that I've gotten from her, I'm going to check and double check. Another example is on my husband's side. They believe that, you know, so back a number of generations, they believe that they're related to a couple of presidents. And honestly, I find that hard to believe. So that's something I really have to delve into and check. And that's one of the things about your, you know, finding your family history online. One thing that you really have to be careful of is sometimes these the websites that have family trees online, the data is only as good as the information that a human being has put into it. And so there's this one woman who copies information from my tree, and she's no, you know, I mean, she's distantly related, but she's copying information about my husband's tree. And I think she just likes to copy a million things and have a large tree, but she has no idea if it's right or not. And so any information that's on her tree, if I'm taking a look at it, I have to check it and double check it. It's not something that I'm going to trust. And so that's what this says here. Verify any and all information, including where the information was found. So that's really very important to do if you're trying to find the, you know, the truth, right? Although I say the truth, and truth be told, that a lot of information is incorrect. And you would find that on the census, that sometimes someone called Carolina on a census might be called Carol 10 years later, or Lena, or Carolina. So you really have to do your due diligence when you're looking at records. All right, so a question was asked, where can I find ship passenger lists? So records are often kept at the port of departure, which is emigration. And so so before 1820, no law existed that said, or that required, that passenger lists had to be kept. So many were destroyed. However, some records do exist. So depending on what you're looking for, there might be records if you're looking for pre-1820. In 1820, congressional law required that ship's captains submit a list of all passengers to the collector of customs at each port. So we should have the information there. So the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration, NARA for short, holds immigration records for various ports from 1820 to 1982. It's arranged by port of arrival. And many records have been digitized. So let me just address that here too. So many records have been digitized. It doesn't mean that all records have been digitized. And then the other thing to keep in mind too is that it's wonderful to have these records that have been digitized. Honestly, not all records will be available all the time either. So for the one person who asked, I found a record and then it's disappeared. I can't find it again. And it's possible that it's no longer available. I guess what I want to say is I would try every which way to find it again, you know, do all sorts of searches. But it is possible that it's no longer there. And that brings up another thing, that if you find a record, you can I guess keep the URL. If you found it online, keep the URL address, right? So it would be http :// and there would be this whole URL address. So you can keep that. That's not a bad thing. But then what you want to do is you also want to write exactly what the original document was. What was it? Was it like the 1892 census or the 1900 census? And be very specific, because if for some reason, and I mean, I can't imagine that the census would disappear, but you never know, but be very specific about where you found it, so that if that website or that web link goes away, that there'll be a way of finding that information again. So that's difficult when something goes away. So again, there are free and fee-based websites that can help you find those passenger lists. And again, I would try that familysearch.org. They have so much information on there, and again, it's inexpensive. And then other sources to find records and information online. And I would say don't hesitate to Google if you know when they arrived or where they arrived. Try Googling. It's amazing that sometimes the things that have come up, and even if, I mean, chances are it's that particular thing won't come up, but maybe a hint to something else will come up. And that's happened to me before, where I've just Googled someone's name and all of a sudden these records or these hints, not necessarily records, but a hint that'll help me maybe go in another direction that I hadn't thought of. And it's been helpful to me. So keep that in mind. Okay, so questions. A couple people had questions about ports of entry and specifically Ellis Island. So a couple of things, I guess I would say, is that inspectors worked from the ship's lists, and those names were provided, and I want to say likely provided, because, you know, who can say 100%? So they were provided by the immigrant at the point of departure. Okay, so if they left from Liverpool, or if they left, I don't know, from say a place in Spain, then their names were likely provided by the immigrant at the point of departure. So those ship's manifests come from the point of departure, not arrival, from the point of departure. So if an error or a change did occur, it usually took place prior to the immigrant's arrival at Ellis Island. So if it was spelled wrong, or, and again, keep in mind that names, they were not as standardized as they are today. So, and even then, if you think about names, even today, names even aren't that standardized. So, but anyway, the changes usually took place prior to the immigrant's arrival at Ellis Island. So sometimes an immigrant would change their name on the ship. They would change the spelling. But the ship's passenger list is the best record of the name an immigrant was using as he or she passed through Ellis Island. And keep in mind too that passengers did change their names. They might choose to simplify or shorten their name for a more Americanized spelling, sometimes as a way to assimilate, right, to make it easier to live and work in America. I know that many people did that. They wanted to, again, assimilate as quickly as they could. And then the US federal census records are also a good tool for looking at names and dates related to arrival. I think you'll hear that many genealogists will say and even agree that the names that the inspectors, right, or the customs did not change names at Ellis Island. They did not. That that's a myth. That it's usually the immigrant that changed it, and it was really their way, again, of assimilating it or changing it in a way to make it easier to live and work in America. And then a little bit later, someone had a very specific question about Ellis Island, and I think I have a slide for that. So then someone asked, what is once removed? And so you've probably heard, this is my first cousin once removed, or this is my second cousin once removed. And what once removed is that it's where you're separated by one or more generations from a cousin. And it's really pretty interesting, honestly. So a parent's first, second, and third cousins are also your first, second, and third cousins, but once removed. And that's because your parents and their generation are one above yours, right? So my dad's first cousin is actually, even I can tell you, I used to call my dad's first cousins and second cousins by aunt this and aunt or uncle that, but really they weren't my aunt and uncle. So they were really my first, second, third cousins, but once removed, right? So, and this goes down the generation as well. So then your grandparents' first, second, and third cousins are also your first, second, and third cousins, but this time twice removed, right? Because they're 2 generations away from you. So this continues throughout each generation. So a first cousin once removed is either the child of your first cousin or the parent of your second cousin. And here we go. Here is a chart. And this is just a simple chart that I threw up here. But if you want, Google cousin chart, Google once removed charts, and then you should be able to pull them up and print them out. And there are a lot of handy forms that are out there, a lot of handy charts that can assist you in figuring things out. But that's what once removed is. And then this gives you an idea. So. Okay, and you know what? I'm going to go back here because if you look down here, it says familysearch.org. So I just want to show you, you can find a lot of things online. This is provided by familysearch.org. Okay, so using the internet, again, we talked a little bit about this, ancestry.com, familysearch.com, MyHeritage, Google, digitized records, census, newspapers, city directories, school yearbooks and obituaries. A lot of these things are on the internet. Oftentimes what I'll do is, I can Google an obituary, or I can Google someone's name and obituaries come up. And to me, it's amazing the number of things that are being digitized that are available, but they're not all available, and nor are they all available just by Googling either. So you can't just look in one place. You actually have to look in a myriad of places. And then there are limitations of records. So again, they're only as good as the information that's provided and recorded. So, on a death certificate, who's answering? Who is answering the question on that death certificate? It might be someone who really doesn't know. I think something, oh my gosh, maybe you're going to think I'm terrible here, but when my mom died, we were at the funeral home, my siblings and I were at the funeral home, and as the man was taking down the information, my siblings are starting to answer some of the questions, and I'm thinking, did you grow up in the same household that I did? Because you're giving all sorts of wrong information. And I think what happened is because I love family history and I love genealogy, that I paid attention when my parents talked, and I knew birth dates and I knew all sorts of things. And I knew all sorts of relatives that maybe my siblings didn't. So it was funny, you know, I mean, it just, so you have to be careful, you know, again, who is giving the information for those records. Not everybody is providing the correct information. And that's even true with, even on birth certificates. Sometimes they switch names and sometimes the name is spelled incorrectly. A friend of mine, her father recently died, I would say in the last 5 years, and the grave marker is wrong. It's got the wrong year. And you think, how can that be? But you know what? Once it's in the headstone, well, what do you do about that? So keep that in mind. Information is not always correct. And then transcribers make mistakes. Dates may be wrong, names may be misspelled, and nicknames can be used too. Just like I mentioned about Carolina, maybe it's Carol, maybe it's Lena, all sorts of things too. And then again, this is what I talked about before. Beware of hints from other family trees and do your due diligence. So in other words, it's up to you to find the right information and to really check those original records that oftentimes are online, but sometimes you just have to go a little bit further and you might have to go to the courthouse or to, I don't know, to the actual record. So now someone had a question about Lithuanian genealogy records. And so this is a very specific question. So what I wanted to do was, this is just a screenshot. We're not actually online. But what I did was I just plugged in, I just Googled Lithuanian genealogy records. And so this is a snapshot of what came up when I Googled it. And you can see here, so this says family search, and it says wiki, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So Lithuanian online genealogy records. Here's more, Office of the Chief Archivist of Lithuania. This is ancestry.com, and it says various towns, Lithuania, bird records index. And again, this is just 4 of the results that came up. It's not everything. And of course, with Google, they can go on and on for many pages. But so what I did was I clicked on, oh, wait a minute, before I think I want to, you know what, let me go back because I think I did it with the next thing when I checked German. So what you could do is you can go on to familysearch.org. You can go on to these and see. So what kind of questions do you have? What are you looking for in those Lithuanian genealogy records? What specifically are you looking for? So, but this will give you an idea of where you can go to find it. And then what I wanted to show you too is, I used to work with a woman of Lithuanian descent. And so I knew that there was a Lithuanian Society of Pittsburgh. And I just Googled it, and this is what came up. And again, this is a screenshot. And on their website, they have a page for Lithuanian genealogy. And so, and this happens oftentimes, that these cultural or nationality societies will have information on genealogy. Now, they may not do the genealogy, they're probably not going to do the research for you, but they might be able to help you or at least help you by pointing you in the right direction, or at least help you by giving you some hints. But I wanted to show you that kind of think broadly. You know, I've talked a little bit about ancestry.com and family search and Google, but then also, you know, think about, okay, what might we have here in Pittsburgh? And so here's an example of that, the Lithuanian Society of Pittsburgh, or I guess it's the Lithuanian Citizen Society of Western Pennsylvania, but they do have information about Lithuanian genealogy. So that might be a place to go for some help. And I would say too, don't go to just one place, go to many places. It's just like when you're searching for your ancestors, you're not just going to go to the census. You're going to look at multiple records to find what you need. So here's an example too. Somebody asked about German genealogy records, and actually somebody asked about Italian. There were a number of asked about Italian, a number asked about Irish, but this would be the same kind of process that you would follow. So what I did was I just Googled German genealogy records, and this is what came up. So right off the top, Ancestry came up. Okay, so German birth records. Then here's Family Search again. And here's the Family Search Wiki. So again, there were a lot of different things, but this is the screenshot that I placed on here. And then this is the one that I chose, the Germany Online Genealogical Records and Family Search. So this is another screenshot. And so what I did was I clicked on familysearch.org. You can do this, and you can see familysearch.org, and then it goes to Wiki, and then Germany Online. So these are great resources. So if you're looking for Italian records, if you're looking for Irish records, a couple people, someone was wondering about records in South America and that. So what I would suggest is something along these lines. And what a wiki is this is where people are actually, people like yourselves or genealogists are putting information into here so that you can find it. So they have found records, or they have some knowledge about doing research, and they're sharing it. And that is one thing that I love about genealogy, is that people are so helpful. People want you to be successful, and they are happy to point you in the right direction. And that's what this is. So that they're sharing the information. They're sharing the tools that they have found to be useful. What I would recommend is that when you go on here, and again, these are free, keep that in mind, is come over here. So click on, you'll want to go to Wiki Home, how about them, how do you search for them. So that is really a big thing, is that, and I fall victim to this, where I go to a website and I think, oh, look at all this information. I'm so excited about this. And I just start clicking. But really what you want to do is you really want to figure out how best to use these resources. And that's why I suggest coming over here. I'm looking for my mouse here. Yeah, there we go. And or my cursor. So find out, what is this? What is the best way to use these? And then you're going to find that your time is going to be well spent. It's almost like building a house, right? You build the foundation first. And so learn how to use the websites that you go to, and then you're going to be able to, in the long run, use your time more wisely. So I would say this is a good way to start. And then just like with the Lithuanian Society, what I did was I put in German Society in Pittsburgh, and this popped up. And I don't know if any of you have heard of this place. I know that some people that I know belong to this, but they have a website that and part of this is a genealogy group. And again, there is information here, and yeah, they're happy to help. They're happy to help. Again, they're not going to find the information. Although I will say that what's interesting is people get, genealogists and people who either professional or amateur, they get very excited. They want you to be successful. And so sometimes all of a sudden, they say, hey, I found it for you. Or, oh, I think this is going to get you further, this information that I have for you. So that's why I think it's a good idea to attend some meetings, and I am going to put in a plug for the North Hills Genealogists, because you can attend the meetings free of charge. They have, for the most part, monthly meetings. As I said, it's only $15 to join, and you get a monthly newsletter. I think the newsletters is 10 times a year, but it's so full of information. It's just, it's amazing. And that's how it is with genealogical groups. Again, they want you to be successful. So here are some specific questions related to all of these different things. So we talked about retrieving documents once found, marriage licenses, so and adoptions, how to use ancestry.com, dual citizenship, generating a family tree, what websites would be good, deaths on Ellis Island, and genealogy travel companies. So we talked about the retrieving documents once they were found, and then can't find them again. Again, I would plug in all sorts of different search, I guess, different words like keywords and things. Think back how you found it before, but then it's possible that it's not there anymore. If you're looking for a marriage, I'm sorry, yeah, so that's what I would do. And then the question I would have is, what kind of document did you find? Because it might be possible to get a copy of that in some manner, but it's just going to depend on what the document was. Marriage licenses. So some of you, as like I said, had some interesting, very specific questions. Some of them, I have to say, were pretty challenging. But so when you asked the questions, I think some of the questions, I was thinking I have more questions. So someone asked for marriage license and or marriage certificate, I guess. So where were these? Where were they here in Allegheny County? And then if they were in Allegheny County, what municipality? So it's not just oftentimes the questions that people ask are, they sound like they're very specific, but really it takes more to delve into them. How to use Ancestry.com. And I would say that the best thing to do is to go to the videos, to go to, just like I mentioned with the wiki on family search, is there are tutorials for Ancestry.com, so how best to use it. And that's what I would do. That would be my best advice for Ancestry.com, is to, and any website really, is to go to their instructions. So again, there are videos, you can learn a lot, but then also how best to use this website, how best to search, things like that. Dual citizenship. The question related to dual citizenship was, if the records aren't there, how do I get dual citizenship? So I guess my question would be, what records have you looked for and where did you look for them? Perhaps they might be found in a different place. It's kind of hard to answer that. So maybe we need to talk a little bit more about that, and I could steer you in the right direction. Generating a family tree, what websites are good? Again, this I think is, it's going to be personal to you. I prefer Ancestry.com, but I do use Family Search. Some people swear just by Family Search. So you may want to, you may just do a little looking around. You can make your trees private. That's the thing, you don't have to share them. And so I know on Ancestry that you can make them public, but you can also make them, I guess, shareable so that other people can change the information on your tree. And honestly, I think that's a bad idea, only because I don't trust everybody out there. I would be pretty careful about sharing my tree with anybody. So my tree is public, but it's, people can't change my tree. So I'm going to skip deaths on Ellis Island real quick, but I'm going to go to genealogy travel companies. So someone had a question, are they worthwhile and how do I find them? And I would say, yes, they are worthwhile. What I would suggest is do a search, do a Google search and plug in where you want to go, because not all genealogy travel companies go every place, right? You're going to have ones that concentrate on China, or that maybe concentrate on certain areas in Europe or in other areas in Asia. So what I would recommend is checking the specific area that you'd want to go, and then reach out. Reach out to maybe a cultural or a nationality-based organization, just like the Lithuanian and the German ones that I found here, and see, because oftentimes they will have connections and they will be able to recommend, or even a genealogy organization, they might have some. I know that there are many genealogy magazines, and so, I mean, oftentimes those, they will recommend different companies. There are ads in them, but of course anybody can buy an ad. But I would say, you know, do your due diligence again, and again, but you have to be very specific on where you're going. And I think those are probably going to be your best. I have known people who have gone on those, where they have gone to, you know, where they've been on a trip, and it's dedicated maybe to Germany or to Poland. What you want to look into, if you are going to be doing any research, then what you want to do is make sure that you're going to have time at the records where you want to do your research. And I think another thing too that you might want to think about is sometimes, oh, and this is, sometimes there are these cruises, right? And I kind of cringe when I say cruises, just because we are in the, you know, we're in this pandemic right now. And, but think about this maybe for the future, right? 2 or 3 years away or 1 year away. But there are places where you can go for conferences. So it's not necessarily where you're doing research, where you're actually looking at the records, say in Poland or in Spain or in France, but maybe you are, you're actually at a conference and it's on a cruise, and there are conferences all over. And I think what's nice now, if you're looking for a conference, is so many conferences are online. That is a benefit of Zoom or WebEx, I guess. And so I think many people are getting used to doing things online, just like we are here. So again, just wanted to go over quickly on genealogical organizations. That Western Pennsylvania Genealogical Society, the North Hills Genealogists, the Genealogical Society of Pennsylvania. There is a section for Allegheny County, but you know, maybe you're not from Southwestern Pennsylvania. Maybe you're from further east, and the Genealogical Society of Pennsylvania might be able to help you out. But the other thing is, don't forget, you know, North Hills Genealogists in Western Pennsylvania, these are very, I don't want to say they're very specific here, because they're going to provide you with a lot of general information on how to find things. I know I have questions about Ohio, and people at the North Hills Genealogists can help me there. But still, again, think about those, I guess, historical societies. If you think of historical societies, if maybe your family's from Somerset, and you need specific information, you might need to contact the Historical Society in Somerset, and maybe you need to go there and look at the records, or maybe look at the books that exist. You know, if you're wondering about, I think in my discussion, I mentioned biographies and things like that. And a lot of times historical societies will have books on families, and yet they're not digitized because they just don't have the resources to digitize them. So if your family is from Somerset or Bucks County or whatever, then it is really definitely worth it to contact the people there to find out what kind of books. It might be worth it to make a trip there. So, and then again, here is the Western PA Genealogical Resources. Again, Carnegie Library in Oakland has the Pennsylvania Room, the Senator John Hines History Center. Of course, they have a lot of information. And then Historic Pittsburgh's online, but again, it's available. And then the Catholic Historical Society, again, a lot of, you know, depending on what you're looking for. And someone did ask, well, first of all, and then here's state archives again, and they might help you out as well. Okay, so someone asked about deaths on Ellis Island, and I did do a little bit of searching, and then these are a couple web pages that might give you some information. I believe that there were about 3,500 people who died on Ellis Island, and so but I believe that there are only 450 that have been digitized. Do you know what I mean? Like information has been digitized. So, but this might give you some hints about that. And let me think, what else? Oh, and then here, again, additional resources. Cindy's list is huge. It's really very, very extensive. It's one of those things that you can go to and you will get lost because there are just so many resources that she provides there. And again, it's provided free of charge. You can go to familytreemagazine.com, familytreetemplates.net to find templates for forms, family search forms, then the National Archives and Records Administration, of course. And then, you know what, if you're just starting out, or even if you're not, you may want to consider signing up for a genealogy tip of the day, something to maybe, you know, a little bit every day. And it maybe keeps you going, keeps you interested, and a light bulb will go on and say, oh, I never thought of that. I think one thing that I find interesting and exciting about genealogy at the same time is that the records that I've searched in the past, they hold so much information. And then when I'm looking at those records, I might be looking for one or two things, or even when I've started, right? I just started looking at something and I'm not really grasping everything that's in those records. So when I go back, it's like, oh yeah, that light bulb comes on and I think, oh my gosh, I wish I had seen this before. And actually I had seen it before, but it didn't have the same significance because now I'm looking for something else. So that's what I think is, like I said, it's exciting because I think you probably already have a lot of information. You just don't realize that you have all of that. So, and I've got questions here, but you know what? I'm going to stop to share. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I want to see if I can pull something else up here. All right, hang on. I'm gonna see.
Linda, while you're doing that, I'll go ahead and give folks some instructions here on how to ask some questions. And thank you, Linda, for all of that wonderful information.
Probably exhausted. Oh my gosh, and we're almost done. I didn't mean to take that long.
I know. But we will be sure to send out the links to all of the resources Linda shared in a follow-up email after the program. But we want to now open up the floor so that you can ask any follow-up questions that you may have. I know we already have a couple here in the chat. But if you'd like to ask your question verbally, what you can do is click on the participant tab at the bottom of the screen and then click on the blue raise your hand button. We'll then call on you to unmute at that time and ask your question. But if you prefer, you can also ask your question through the chat feature found at the bottom of the toolbar on the screen. And we'll do our best to try to get into as many questions as possible. So I actually have a couple of questions here already in the chat, Linda, if we want to start with those. Right. The first question is from Christine. And she asked, do you have a source? I know, Christine. I was just going to say, I do too. Do you have a source that you prefer for sourcing obituaries online? Something like newspapers.com or our Google archive?
Yeah, I think newspapers.com. That's what I would recommend. Yeah. But that's my preference, right? I mean, it's going to depend on what it's going to be, again, personal preference.
Okay. And then we have two questions from Leah. The first one, my great-grandfather was adopted by his sister to avoid the draft and took her married name. Would his previous last name be lost, or how would I search for it?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess, what years are we talking? Did she say?
So it actually, we're not even talking U.S. It was Russia. Ooh. So we're not even, so even further back, turn of the century, so late 1800s, early 1900s. Actually, I guess late 1800s.
Okay, so So he was adopted by his sister so he could avoid the draft.
I guess the story goes, in Russia, they were allowed to, one male out of every family didn't have to be drafted to keep the family name going. His sister was married but didn't have any children at the time. And so she adopted him, so he wasn't drafted.
Oh,
And
sure.
so he took her name, or her and her husband's name, but they were orphaned before that. But she was that much older that she was married at the time. And yeah, that was, but like I said, whenever she adopted him, he took her name and he just kept it, I guess. And like it's been passed down, but like I said, I don't know to even try to go back to if it would be lost.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So she, you know what, I have to tell you, I don't know enough about Russian surnames. And so, but I would think that, so he took the married name is what he did. Is that it?
Yes, he took her husband's name.
Yeah.
The brother-in-law's last name.
Right. So yeah, is there, I think what you'd have to do is, again, you'd have to look at different records, right? So in other words, have you found, so I guess you haven't found any birth records for him, or have you? You haven't.
We haven't, and we haven't, and to top it off, he snuck out of Russia. So he didn't even leave legally, which makes it even, he bribed their way out. At least my great-grandmother left legally, but he bribed his way out. So unfortunately, we don't even have legal passage out. I think we have a ship record in Germany some way, but I know that was even in question. So
Yeah.
I think the word was character was the way they described him.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. So I guess now, have you found a marriage record? Do you have a marriage record?
I haven't even gone back that far. We're just starting to look.
Oh, okay. So I think probably, at least what I do is I again, write down, you know what I mean? What you want to do is what records do you have? What records do you have? And then what's missing, right? So do you have any records at all?
I have 2 of the kids were born in the U.S., 2 were born in Russia. So we have those, and we have the girls that were born in Russia and came here. All the women came legally. So we have all of their documents and passports because they came separately. The men came and they were supposed to return and ended up having the women follow.
Okay.
So we have their stuff, the women's stuff legally. Wow.
Okay. So I think, right. So I think what you need to do is, again, take a look at those. Because I guess I'm a little unsure of, and maybe we should talk, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's a goofy story, but it's but it just has a couple layers to it.
Right, right. But I think what you have to do though is to, record all the information you have, all the names, the dates, because in there somewhere should be, we'll put it this way, there's going to be information in there that you have. However, it might be difficult. It's not going to be, what am I trying to say here? It's not going to be straightforward. It doesn't seem like it's going to be straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But why don't we talk, we can talk afterwards, or maybe we can email back and forth.
No, it'd be wonderful.
Okay, that sounds good.
And Linda, we'll share your email address in the follow-up email so people can get in touch with you too, if that's all right.
Sure.
And Leah, you had a second question here about, would state archives have records from people coming through Philly before Ellis Island?
Would state records? I don't know if state records would. That I'm not sure. but there should be records. So your family didn't come through Ellis Island, right?
The other side, they did. One side came through Ellis Island, the other side didn't. So that's why I was curious. Whenever you mentioned state records and possibly using those, I went, oh, since everyone's in Pennsylvania and so Philadelphia was another port of entrance, I didn't know if that would fall, if that may have.
Yeah, you know what, and so honestly, I am not sure if the state records would, but I think you're asking a good question, because what you can do is you can go on and see where state records are, see what the state records have. And that's the thing, is sometimes these records are located in different places, and so you're really not going to just be looking in one place. You're going to be looking in many, many places. So I would say try state records. But maybe, you know what I mean? Like they might not be there.
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
But it's certainly a place to look. Now, are you using any websites, or
Just started.
Oh, you just started on all of this. Okay. All right. I think probably what I would, yeah. Are you using any, like the family, the family group sheets at all, or?
I'd say it's literally just family stuff I've written down. Haven't really gotten into it since I've been an adult. Just stuff I've written in high school and younger. And so since the internet's really picked up, I've not had the time to sit down. But
yeah, it's hard to find the time. Hard to be organized.
To try again.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thanks, Leah. Those are great questions. Right now, I'm not seeing any others coming through the chat or anybody raising their hand, but Linda, did you have something else you wanted to pull up and share?
So I can't remember who asked this question, but somebody asked a question about the McKenna family and Kennemetal. And I'm hoping that the person is here. So what I did was, it was a very specific question. And what I did was I just did, there are two websites that I wanted to show. One is, this is actually with Kennemetal, and it does have information about Kennemetal here. So again, all I did was I just did a quick Google. So that was this one. And then I have, let me see, there was something else, but I would say Google Kennemetal. And then I, again, go to the, I would suggest that the person go to the Heinz History Center, or contact the people at the Heinz History Center, because there are probably books written about the family. And then also, my understanding is that they were in Latrobe. It started in Latrobe. So there might be some information on the family there. But I think that they also asked about Beaver Falls. I think I have the question here. They asked about Beaver Falls and then Conway. So again, you'll probably, and I would recommend going to the Historical Society, because they should have information there. And again, a lot of times it's in a roundabout way that you find information. So,
well, thanks, Linda. That was a lot of wonderful information. And I'm going to do last call on any questions here. So just to give everyone one final chance to get in their questions. And I'm not seeing anything. So I just want to say thank you again to everyone for attending today's Ancestry Exploration event. And as I mentioned in the follow-up email, all participants will receive a copy of the recording of this program for your reference. We'll also, I believe, maybe share Linda's slides with everyone, so you'll get those resources as well. And if you have any questions for Linda, her email address will also be included. So we hope to see you again soon at one of our other upcoming virtual programs. And all the best, and go Dukes, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Audrey and Sarah.
Thank you.